Welcome. I'm so happy you are joining the Moore County Schools Building Engineers in K-12 Classrooms Conference. This session is Makey Making It from Scratch, a recipe for creativity. I'm MaryLu Ringwood, an instructional technology facilitator and K-5 STEAM Lab facilitator at Forestville Road Elementary School in Wake County. I have attended the Moore County Schools Building Engineers Conference in the past and was so excited with all that I saw and learned in that time. I was honored to be asked to present at the conference this year, although a little disappointed that the conference had to be moved to a virtual environment. I'm excited to be able to reach more people, more educators, and more administrators to promote the idea of coding in the classroom. I love to share ideas with fellow teachers because it gives me the opportunity to connect with others and to grow my personal learning network. Please follow me on Twitter or feel free to reach out to me at my email. In this session, I will be giving you an overview of Scratch, an online coding program, Makey Makey, an invention kit. We'll be talking about how to put them together, and finally, some project ideas you can implement in your classroom. Please remember to complete the evaluation that will be you'll have at the end of the presentation by November 30th so that you can receive your certificate for attending. Certificates will be sent out beginning December 1st. Links to my presentation can be found in the session description. So Scratch is a free online coding language. It was created at the MIT Media Lab by the Lifelong Kindergarten Group, which I just love the name of that. Kindergarten is such a great age, such a great time for children and learning because everything is new and they're so excited. And I love to promote that idea throughout all grades. Scratch is designed to be fun, educational, and easy to learn. The tools built into Scratch allow students to create interactive stories, games, art, and simulations using a very visual, color-coded block-based programming. Scratch has built-in paint editors and sound editors, which allow students to create their own characters and provide their own recordings and or audio for their activity. It adds unlimited options for what students can do and how you can connect it to the curriculum no matter what you teach. Scratch can be downloaded as an app, but I have only ever used it as an online program and find that works great for my students. They're able to set up their account through my teacher account and access it both at home and at school. Scratch is designed for children 8 to 16, but as a teacher, I love learning the coding skills that it provides. It encourages them to think creatively, work collaboratively, and reason systematically, which is so important in every academic subject. There is a Scratch education component, which allows teachers to create free accounts. And Scratch requires no prior coding knowledge. And they're easy to follow tutorials, make it simple for even pre-readers to follow along. So, creating teacher accounts allows you to have a student account within you create a class, and then you can add students to that class. It allows you to manage participation, share studios, which is where students can put their projects so that all of them can access each other's projects to look at, to evaluate, to give feedback on. It also allows you to share project shells, and project shells are basically the template that students would use to create their work. So if you wanted, you could create a project shell with a specific background or specific characters or what we call sprites. And that way all students are using the same materials but creating their own projects. So I'm going to show you real quickly I've linked here a guide to teacher accounts, which gives you all the information you need to create your teacher account and how to add your students. All right. Now, I will say that having a teacher account isn't immediate. Like other programs, when you sign up, you immediately have access. With a Scratch account, you actually will create your account, you'll register, and it will take up to 24 hours for you to get an email that your account has been created. So it's something that you do want to do a couple of days prior to using it with your class. This also, I have another link just to request a teacher account. If you've already created a Scratch account and you just want to link it to your current account, you can do that. And I'm going to move this over to the side here. So, getting started. So, like most programs, we like to know what we're doing. One thing great about Scratch is that you can learn along with your students, but I know I'm not comfortable going in completely blind. I've learned a lot about Scratch from my students and with my students, but I needed to have some background before I got started. So within our Scratch for Educators, I have a few different links here. So this link will take you to some information about how teachers and students are using Scratch. All of these I've pretty much linked in other places within this presentation, so I will come to them in a bit, but I just wanted you to have quickly this spot that you could find everything. There's also an educator guide. I will let you know that the educator guide is very much geared towards you sharing how to use Scratch with other teachers, but I have found that the information in it is also great for teaching students. So it gives you some of the basic tutorials and how you might teach them to others. Okay, and all of these you can download yourself and print. Scratch in Practice is a great site which has links to different activities. Again, getting started resources, curriculum connections, how to use it to engage students based on their different interests, students working together, and then projects with a purpose, which is always a great way to use any coding activities or any activities in our STEAM labs or classrooms where we want students to solve real world challenges. So this is another site. Scratch Ed is an older site. It's actually been archived, but the people at Scratch, it's interesting, this was done through Harvard University. So it's sort of a partnership between MIT and Harvard, where they created this Scratch Ed site for teachers to have a place to talk to other people using Scratch. So it has been archived, but they've made it so that you can still access all of the resources, which is great because not only are there resources that teachers have created and different types of projects, lessons, things like that, you can search through it based on just the grade level that you want to work with. What you're looking for, whether it be a lesson plan or just an activity, the curriculum area, and also by language. Because Scratch is universal and it is used in countries around the world, there are obviously teachers around the world using it. So you can search for things that were done just in English, if that's what you want. Also, you can go back and look at some discussions, some great discussions, questions you may have. Just beware that for some of the conversations in there, you may find that it doesn't apply. Scratch has been updated in the last couple years. Actually, I think it was just about a year ago. It was updated to 3.0. So you may see some things in the archive discussions that relate more to earlier versions. But a lot of good discussions that I've gone back just as far as getting started with students, troubleshooting with students, and then finally teaching with Scratch is a site. is a Facebook page. If you're on Facebook, it's a great place to find things that teachers are doing in their classrooms. Very timely. People will post, things for upcoming holidays, upcoming events that are very timely. So it's a great spot to check out activities that teachers are doing. So when you get started with your students, so once you've created your teacher account and you need to add students, you have three options. One option is to share a code with students. That's usually the option I use with my 4th and 5th graders. I just share the code. I tell them to use their first initial and their last name, or their first initial and a number code, something that they're not easily identifiable always, and then they create their own password. This can be great if students are good at remembering passwords. I try to promote digital citizenship and the importance of them starting to create passwords, but sometimes that is a challenge. So another way that you can add students is to add them individually, or you can upload a CVS and that will give them all a password. It is super easy to change student passwords. I've had students that I've had to change passwords at the beginning of each class because they tend to forget. Often I only see them once a week, so it can be hard. So once they are in, I tend to start with, they can go to the tutorial page. So there's two different ways, depending on the class and the amount of time we have to do Scratch. Sometimes I let them start on the tutorial page and choose a tutorial that they're excited to learn, that excites them, and let them do that tutorial. Or I will assign a specific tutorial, and usually I start with the animated name. I've found that different classes require different plans. Some of my students are very self-directed, so they will jump right in and do a tutorial and then work with each other. Others, I find that I need to be more specific. I need to provide that project and then work through with them together. Especially, I use that more when I'm working with 3rd grade. I tend to be much more teacher-directed in that lesson. The CS First, if you're not familiar with the Google CS First curriculum, this is a Google for Education initiative, and what is great is many of the tutorials and lessons are Scratch. So if you want to get started on a longer coding lesson plan or lesson curriculum, this is a great place to start because it will go through quite a few of the tutorials that you have in Scratch, and we'll give them a very systematic way of going through and learning. So again, there's the tutorials in Scratch, and I'm going to go quickly. So let me go down here first. If you want to use the tutorials and you have students who are more tactile, more visual, then they want to actually hold something, be able to look at something. These tutorial cards go through every piece in the videos step by step, but it gives them something to sort of hold on to go through individually. So let me go back and show you how this relates. Oh, I'm sorry. So when we go into Scratch and we have logged in, so your students will have logged in, they will go to Create. And this is creating their first project. And then they will click on Tutorials. And so I'm going to start right here with Animate a Name. And so what happens is they watch the video.
You can use Scratch to animate a name and bring it to life. Make the letters change color.
And then they actually close this or shrink it. And then they do the steps that they just saw in that part of the video. And they can test it. So this would be all of their coding blocks. This is their canvas where they write their program. And then over here is where they can see what happens. So they can test it out. So the tutorials here match the coding cards. Now, there is not coding cards for every single tutorial, but there are for many of the beginning ones that once they've done a few tutorials, kids are very quick to pick up what they need, to what they need to do to create more advanced programs. One that I do like to do is have them make sure that they go through the animations that talk. That's a great one for as they move further along in using Makey Makey and Scratch. Create Code Load is a site. Now this is MyTal, has created this site, and she does a ton of activities with Scratch. So she focuses on game design in Scratch. I tend to look at her blog because in her blog, she will have posts about a lot of different programs. These are lessons and templates and games that she has created that include a lesson for how to do them. One of the ones that I love to do at this time of year, and I didn't get to do this year, is this Scratch lesson on creating a Halloween game. It did take my students past Halloween last year to do it, but what you do when you go in, you can read through the lesson, and if it's something you would like to do, you click on Send Me the Starter Project. All you have to do is put in your email. She will send you basically the template with the Halloween backgrounds and the characters that the students need to use. And then you have everything you need to get started, because along with it, there is a video for each step in the program. This is one that I usually start out teaching students as a whole group. And then as they go through and we get students that are moving a little bit faster than others, I create a slide with all the videos linked so that students can work independently through the various steps to create their game. And that gives me time to go back to throughout the class and facilitate with students who need more help. So I do love this particular site, Create Code Load, because of all of the wonderful programs that are involved. I'm going to go back to Scratch for just a minute. And I want to show you that in Scratch, when the students are creating, so I'm going to go to this one just so I can show you real quickly. So this is a sprite right here. Everything in the program, I should say, that can do an action, whether it's an object or a character, is considered a sprite. You name your sprites. You can choose more sprites, and students learn how to do this. And so each item is a sprite. Now the sprite, this cat, if he had a hat, that would be a separate sprite if I wanted his hat to do things like fly off his head or spin around. If it was something that I'm going to program to have an action, it's a sprite. There's also costumes. So you can create, the students can actually draw costumes on the characters or the sprites. They can draw their own characters. And then there are sounds. There are sounds that are included, and students can create sounds. Very simple. It's right there. And all they need to do then is go back and add the sounds. I love that the program blocks are color-coded, similar to other programs. They're not the same colors, but it's easy for me to say to students when they are looking for something specific, you're looking for a purple block or you're looking for a pink block. One of the greatest things about Scratch is that every year I find that at least one or two of my students in each class has used Scratch before and are excited to be able to use it in class. What's nice is that these students often become leaders and help other students and they help me often to understand when we run into problems. So I do love that Scratch is something that isn't just considered a school tool. It's something that kids love to do at home. I've had kids come and ask me to please write down their login so that when they get home, they can continue working on their projects and share them with family. I'm going to move on now to Makey Makey. So Makey Makey is called an invention kit for the 21st century. It promotes the concept of invention literacy. So students can combine everyday tactile materials with coding projects they've created to bring their ideas to life. I'm going to go through what the board is, how it attaches, the purpose, and some more resources that you can use for Makey Making. While projects or programs like Scratch teach students how to create programs or software, Makey Makey is more of a hardware design program. So with a Makey Makey board, which is a circuit board, the students are basically creating an external keyboard or external input device for their computer or Chromebook. They may create a game controller, a dance mat, a musical instrument. They begin to understand how things like at a museum, when they push a button and a video pops up, or an audio clip plays explaining an artifact in the museum, how those things work. They begin to understand the connection between the physical item and the electrical or the computer-based item. So how those two connect and how they can use that to create new things. So the Makey Makey board is basically a circuit board. It sends electrical signals to the computer that can control the keyboard. So you can see the picture at the top is at the front of a Makey Makey board. Basically, you can control the 4 arrow keys, the space bar, and the click, or that would either be the right click or the left click on a mouse or the click on a touch bar. So the things that you actually can program in Tinker or in Scratch, you can control with the Makey Makey. In every Makey Makey kit, you receive a board. You get about 8 alligator clips, and you get a USB cable to connect the Makey Makey to the device. On the back of the Makey Makey board, there are more options to control specific letter keys on the keyboard, and you can do some reprogramming. I don't use at this point the back of the board. Usually having 6 options for control is plenty for my elementary students, but I'm sure students in middle and high, as they get into more involved projects, would probably appreciate being able to have more options. You'll notice at the bottom of the bar, it says Earth. This is where one of the alligator clips have to clip to Earth. One then would clip to the key that you want to control, and then together they would link. So what we're also doing, they would link through a conductive material. One of the things that we're also teaching, and I usually present Makey Makey when the students are learning about electricity in science, because it's a great way to let them experiment with conductive materials and also understand the idea of open and closed circuits. So you will notice just real quickly, how we attach this to the computer is, as I said, with the USB cord, and it works on Windows, Mac, and Chromebooks. It works on anything that would support a USB keyboard or mouse. So it's not wireless. So therefore, there has to be a USB port on the device. And there is no programs to download. Makey Makey doesn't require any sort of software at all. This is strictly controlling controlling the software on your computer with an external device. So some resources, and this is one that really the best way to learn Makey Makey is to get hold of a Makey Makey kit, plug it in, and just practice. So what I've got here is an educator's guide, and this one is basically what you would go through if you were able to go to a Makey Makey workshop. A lot of what is in here, it talks about how you could use it in the classroom, in a STEAM lab, or media center, in the, for homeschool educators, informal educators in camps. But then it also goes in, so it gives you a lot of background, a lot of links to standards and how it ties in. Then there are actual lesson plans, and these are provided through the Makey Makey site at Makey Makey K-12, which is linked above. And this gives you, lots of different types of lessons. One here that's linked you might be interested in is this, Jen Gilbert, and I'm sorry, does Makey Makey with Lego. This is something I did not get to last year. That was part of my plan, to get to Makey Makey with Lego. Hopefully in the future I'll be able to do that. As a big Lego fan, and I know my students love Legos, I want to be able to include that in in how they do it, and how they use Makey Makey. Okay, Instructables is also this, you'll often see on sites and on different resources, Makey Makey Labs, L-A-B-Z. Makey Makey Labs is the Instructable site for Makey Makey. And there are hundreds of projects here that you can do with your students. Oh, there we go. So these are generally student created or teacher created projects that they have shared. And what's nice, if you've ever used Makey Make, or used Instructables, these are written by other users. These on the Instructables teachers page have been written by teachers or students, and they're step by step. So sometimes you might find some that maybe you want to give your students access to 2 or 3 and let them choose, or just let them see them to spark their imagination. The Makey Makey blog has, again, this is very current. It gives you access to different types of programs. It's a lot of articles, but that also give you ideas of how to use your Makey Makey. All right. Then again, this is also on the Makey Makey site. Makey Makey Lessons and Makey Makey at Home. This is one I want to share. This is called Makey Makey at Home Lessons, but I actually think that many of these lessons could be used in the classroom. So, how to create a circuit, using your hands as your connective, your human circuit, what is conductive, ways that you can have students experiment to learn about it. Conductive materials, what does conduct electricity, draw an instrument. So one of the cool things about Makey Makey is that graphite in pencils is conductive. Generally, number 2 pencils are a little bit difficult. You have to really get it on there dark. But if you buy a B, where we have number 2, there's also B pencils. They work great. So students can actually create drawings that then connect to their computer and make things happen. So those are really fun to do. So when you put Scratch and Makey Makey together, students write a program and then they actually create their own input device, their own way to play or interact with their program. And I've seen kids do all sorts of things, from creating paper cups that have foil on them to some of my favorite projects, which I will get to in a minute. But the way that I like to introduce Makey Makey with Scratch, so generally my students have already done Scratch. They've learned the basics of how to write a program. And then I'm ready to introduce Makey Makey. The first day is usually an exploration day. And what I do is I create the stations myself. I choose 3 to 4 Scratch programs that I want them to do. And at the bottom, you'll notice I've highlighted 3 programs that I use always. I create the Makey Makey controller. So you'll notice the first one is actually made with pencils over here. I made a controller. I made a similar one. This is actually not my picture. This one is made with pencil. So they drew the arrows, the Pac-Man shapes in the arrow shapes or in the directions the Pac-Man would go, and they connected them to the Makey Makey, which connected to the computer. So the students could tap on the Pac-Man, moving in the direction they want to make the Pac-Man on screen move. The one at the bottom is a piano. This one is also done with pencil, where the students touch the different lines and it makes the program play. For bongos, I have used solo cups and covered the bottom of them with foil, and the students actually tapped on the cups to make the bongos play. I've also used colored paper with brads, with the little metal brads in it, as the piano circuit or as the piano controller. So what I do is I set them out, but I don't tell students how to make them work. I have them set up and students have to figure it out. And that little bit of struggle brings them a lot more understanding as to how it works, what closes the circuit. They begin to experiment with, can they make a circuit with 2 or 3 people? It's usually a fun, chaotic day in my lab. The students love going from one to the other. I always have one that includes water. Because that gives them they always have questions about how can there be one with water and they don't get electrocuted. So I love the questions that come up, the struggle to understand, and then the light bulb moment when they figure things out. So then the second day, on day 2, I give them generally about 6 to 8, maybe more, Scratch programs. I create a slide with links to a bunch of different Scratch programs that they can access. I give each group a Makey Makey kit. And then I put out a table of a variety of materials. There's paper, there's some of the pencils that work, foil, paper clips, brads. You'll notice I had some of the craft grid, this plastic grid that people use for crafting for yarn, I guess a knitting, I'm not even sure what you call it, cross stitch. But I have a lab full of, a variety of materials. I throw them all out there and I let students experiment. Play-Doh is great to use. They love using Play-Doh and it's very conductive, so that's a fun one. You'll notice up here, this one is one where students did create. They used the solo cups and foil. Oftentimes students will repeat what they've seen the first time, but that's what makes them comfortable. And I'm okay with that because I want them to build it and understand it themselves. And then they start to realize like, oh, I can do something else with this. So that day is probably more chaotic than the first day as students figure out how to create their own input devices to connect to the Makey Makey and make those Scratch programs work. And once they've got all that down, then we get to some real fun and we start creating. And this is where I love to work with classroom teachers and say, hey, what are you working on? What is your final project on this unit? What is your what do you want them to be able to share or to show that they've learned? And then we let them start creating. Last year, I had a group of students that did interactive posters. This was so much fun. I let students create their own poster. I talked with their classroom teacher and they said, you know what? Let them choose whatever subject, whatever content they want. So they learned to build the program in Scratch. They recorded their audio clips. They figured out what each audio clip was going to map to, whether it was an arrow key, the space bar, the click. Then they designed their input mechanism. So first they had to design their poster, and then they had to figure out how were people going to use their poster to hear what they recorded. So they had to do a lot of critical thinking there, a lot of strategic thinking of putting things together, figuring out each step before they created their whole poster, because they did learn quickly that in some cases their mechanism needed to be able to connect their Makey Makey clips, the alligator clips to the edge of the board, so they couldn't draw everything at the edge of the board. So they did work really hard on figuring out how to make that work. They did some of them, math methods to solve a problem with our new math, Common Core math. Often students are learning 2 or 3 different ways to solve a problem. So I had a group that decided to create a math problem poster where they did a multiplication and showed multiple ways to solve it. In science, they can do habitats, they can do processes, how photosynthesis works, how electricity works. So they can do a lot of that. A story arc in literature. In social studies, they can do landforms. They can do evolution type things or processes of erosion. The kids had so many great ideas. I was so impressed. And I actually had a group of students who I took to NC Ties, and they presented their posters and how they used Scratch and Makey Makey. So, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. So you'll notice that my first group did the regions of North Carolina, a big part of the 4th grade curriculum. So they created their map. And they showed 3 of the regions, and then they recorded what each region was known for, the landscape of the region, the crops that were grown there, all different information about each region that they had learned. The middle one is the math group I talked about. And finally, the one at the end, they did a science project on adaptations, and they drew a bunch of different animals, and then they mapped out, they created their program and mapped them to the different arrow keys that talked about what adaptations each animal had that made them able to survive in that environment that they lived in. Oh, doesn't want to disappear today. Okay, so finally, I actually did a Makey Makey course this summer. And this was my project that I created, and it was actually late spring that I did it, and we were talking, we were still in the pandemic sort of situation. So we talked about, one of the things I talked about was, this is a Makey Makey project I created with Scratch, and I call it my high five goodbye doorbell. So when I'm in class, at the end of class, leaving my STEAM lab can be quite chaotic because I'm trying to get students to, clean up, line up, meet their teacher. There's always some stragglers that I'm trying to help out. So everybody wants to say goodbye, and it can't always happen. So I created this doorbell where students can give it a high five, and they will get a random goodbye greeting from me. It's a lot of fun. I haven't yet had the opportunity to do it with students since we haven't been back in school yet with our 4th and 5th graders, and our younger ones aren't yet coming to STEAM Lab, but I'm looking forward to seeing their reaction to it. So some other project ideas and places that you can find resources. Techie Kids is a great site that actually has lots of projects created by kids. And this is something I like to share with the kids because they actually see other students doing it. This footpad one is actually one of my students did work on last year. That was his project for NC Ties, and at the last minute, it just wouldn't work. We had a few problems we just couldn't overcome. We worked together, and it just didn't work. But he overcame, and he actually created a hand size or a small pad that he used the same concept with his fingers. But he loved this idea. But I just love sharing with them some of the different things that they can do. I let them explore here and see. Create, Collaborate, Innovate is a poetry project. I'm sorry, it's a poetry project you'll find on the blog Create, Collaborate, Innovate. And it's probably, I think it's basically a literature-based project, but it could be done with high school, middle school students, but I think there's ways that it could also be adapted to elementary students. Tom Heck, his assistive technology project is one that I think is awesome, especially when we start to talk about empathy with students. This is a great project for middle and high school students where they come up with a way that they can use Scratch or any online program and Makey Makey to help a student who may have a disability. So this is an awesome project. The link I share there goes into his whole the background and what he did, and he did this with a school in North Carolina, but I believe it was high school students. Pretty awesome. You could create interactive word walls, vocabulary animations. This is one when we talked about animate a name in Scratch. Once students learn how to animate their name, they could use that same process with the letters in a vocabulary word. And then they could record definitions, uses, different ways the word is used. They could record for each letter something about that word. You could connect it to Makey Makey, and now it becomes an interactive activity where the kids are learning the word and hearing the word. Choose your own adventure stories. And finally, here at the end, I have Makey Makey challenges. And this is a Google slide with some challenges. But what's really cool is there are challenges here to get you started. But then there's also blank cards so you can create your own. I love some of these basic ones. Can you prepare a word sort in Scratch and create an interactive controller to sort the words? Can you write a comparison of two novels, create a display with interactive buttons so that people can hear it? These are great. The interactive posters are probably one of my favorite things that kids can use because they get excited. They really have to think through their project in order to use it well. In order for it to really work and to do what they want it to do, they have to think. And it makes them review their content, repeat their content as they record it. Because of course they always want it to be perfect. So these are just some fun ways, and this just provides some ELA and some STEM challenges. But as I said, you have the option there to then create your own challenges and share those cards with students. So that is basically how you would use Scratch and Makey Makey to create some projects. I would love for you to share your projects with me. Please tweet them out or email me and let me know what you're doing. I'd love to share your projects with others, and maybe we can work together and create some projects. Please remember that this is the link to the evaluation, and it will also be in the session description, or in the presentation will be in the session description. And please complete your evaluation by the 30th. And then all the certificates will be sent out on the 1st. I appreciate you attending this session, and I look forward to seeing what you're doing with Makey Makey and Scratch.